Hello, I'm Jesse Ventura, Governor of the great state of Minnesota, and I want to welcome all of you to the Bell Live program and to Minnesota. Minnesota is the home of many breathtaking and important natural resources, from forests and wetland to prairies and over 10,000 lakes. Actually, 15,328 at last count. One of the most spectacular of these resources is Lake Superior, the largest of the Great Lakes. Bell Live comes to your classroom live from the shores of Lake Superior in Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth lies at the southern end of Minnesota's Arrowhead region, some 150 miles north of my office in the state capital of St. Paul. I hope you're ready as Bell Live takes you on an exciting electronic field trip of discovery. Over the next hour, you will see spectacular natural settings, meet some of our wonderful people, and learn about the exciting scientific discoveries being made today. And while you are watching, just remember this: the exciting scientific discoveries of tomorrow will be made by many of you watching today. Welcome to Bell Live.
It's Bell Live. Today we're going on an adventure to learn about the biggest of the Great Lakes, Lake Superior. You'll find out how big the lake really is, what lives in it, and how researchers study all about it. So get ready for a Superior adventure on Bell Live.
Well, welcome to Duluth, Minnesota. Hi, I'm Belinda Jensen. We're so glad that you're here for this Superior adventure. What a beautiful view we have of the lift bridge, and it's just a gorgeous day here in Duluth in the 60s with sunshine, unbelievable. And we're going to have a great show for you today. We are at the Great Lakes Aquarium, which is the largest freshwater aquarium in the United States. So it is a beautiful place. We're going to show you around in just a few minutes. But this is a live show, everyone, so we want to hear from you. There's a bunch of different ways you can contact us with questions, and we know you have some good questions. So you can call us. Our phone number is 218-786-0387, and we'll take your questions live. Also, you can email us a question. We'd love to hear from you. The email address is belllive.umn.edu, and then when you go onto that website, you just go under Ask a Question. And if we'd love for you to check out that website after the show and in days to come, because we'll have more information about this wonderful experience on there. Also, you can fax us a question. Our fax line number is 218-727-6324. Don't worry if you didn't have a pen and paper. We will be repeating these numbers throughout the show, and we'd love to hear from you. We're so happy to have you here on this beautiful morning, and I'd like to introduce you to some of our other friends. Dave?
Thanks, Belinda. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Huddleston, and we're on the research deck of the Blue Heron, one of the boats we'll be using today. And we're excited because we're going to learn a lot of fascinating things about Lake Superior, or as the Native Americans call it, Lake Gitchagumi. We want to introduce you to members of the Bell Live team. They're going to help the researchers with some of our cool experiments.
I'm Colin Haverkamp. I go to Irondale High School in New Brighton.
Hi, I'm Adam Paulson. I go to Chamber Park High School.
Hi, I'm Scott Seifer. I go to Parkers Prairie High School.
I'm Stephen Samuel. I go to Spring Valley High School.
Hi, I'm Marissa Ontko. I'm 9th grade and I go to Roseville Area High School.
Hi, my name is Kelly Striegel and I'm a 9th grader at Holy Angels.
Hi, I'm Heather Sandin. I'm a 9th grader at Altoona High School.
Hi, my name is Brittany McEwen and I'm a 9th grader at Champlain Park High School.
Hi, I'm Dana O'Malley. I'm homeschooled and I'm in 8th grade.
All right, you guys ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, Belinda, what are we going to do first?
Well, Dave, we're so excited. We're with Tom Beery, and he's in charge of education. We're here at the aquarium. The aquarium is open, and folks are coming in, and we're heading to the second level. Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
We're so happy to be here at this beautiful aquarium.
We're happy to have you.
Well, what is the big purpose of having a freshwater aquarium?
Well, the purpose is education. We use Lake Superior as a lens to better understand freshwater, and we view the lake three ways: physical lake, the living lake, and the cultural lake. All right, but first, a tour at Great Lakes Aquarium starts with the beauty and wonder of fresh water.
It's so much that when you walk in, that wall of water is so amazing here at the aquarium.
It focuses your thought. And then it's the ecosystem approach. Isle Royal is one of our big exhibits, which focuses on the major habitats around the lake. Like, check out this giant, ancient lake sturgeon.
He's huge.
Pretty amazing.
He's wonderful.
Well, and then you can travel up the North Shore to the Baptism River exhibit, which is our fast-moving North Shore stream.
And there's so many wonderful streams that flow into these Great Lakes. So
all
this
around
just
the
shows
lake.
You all the trout and everything else.
Yeah, check out the trout. Good place to watch trout. And then it's on to Otter Cove, the far North Shore, where this exhibit features our otter, as well as the far north, the boreal forest.
Yeah, and then some birds here.
Our aviary, Kakagan Slough. It focuses on birds and the importance of wetlands. And then there's all kinds of other critters that really help tell the story. Yeah.
Frogs, toads.
And then there's the cultural interactives that really bring to life the commerce, the lake management, the human history. Like right here. Okay, you can pilot a boat from Duluth, Minnesota, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean.
See, that's so cool for kids to understand the locks and the dams and how all the Great Lakes are connected, and it really affects so many states and so many people.
First-hand experience.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Now, what's this?
Okay, this is our submersible, which simulates going to the bottom of the lake, all right? So whether you're going to the bottom of the lake, picking up a crayfish for a closer look, comparing Lake Superior to another Great Lake, or sitting back and watching the otter, you're getting the big picture.
Sure.
All aspects.
And those ancient sturgeons are so cool. They look like alligators. We're going to have one in just a few seconds for you to look at.
They're great.
Well, it's so nice of you to invite us to your aquarium and kind of let us take over the place. And we're so excited to show everyone all around. So thank you.
We're happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Tom. Really do appreciate it. Well, we have just a Superior adventure ahead, and coming up in just a few minutes, something that's near and dear to my heart because I am a meteorologist. We're going to talk about the weather.
There are 5 Great Lakes. Using this map, can you name them from east to west? Talk it over with your neighbor. The correct answer from east to west is Ontario, Erie, Huron, Michigan, and Superior.
Well, out of those 5 lakes, as we've been talking about, Lake Superior is the biggest and the grandest, and it's behind me. Look at this. This is a satellite picture of the lake. It is a lot of blue water, let me tell you. And 3 states and also another country border this lake. And we're talking about 49,000 square miles of water. So when you're talking about this much water, 150 feet deep in some locations, it has to affect the weather around the lake, and it sure does. All the Great Lakes affect the weather around them. Now, if you live along the shoreline of the Great Lakes, you have to get used to having very different weather than your neighbors almost every day. Sometimes it's 10 to 15 degrees cooler. It sometimes is warmer in the winter. The fall colors change later. And yes, we're talking about a lot of snow. If you live on certain parts of the shoreline of the Great Lakes, we're talking about a lot of snow. Well, how does this work? Well, miles and miles of water, as I was talking about, absorb a lot of heat, absorb the heat from the warmer months. And as they absorb that heat throughout the summer months, they actually cool down the area. It's almost like a bubble of cooler air that hangs over the lake in the summer months. And so sometimes, as I mentioned, 10 to 15 degrees cooler. Then in the winter, the lake actually lets some of that heat out, and so it is warmer in the winter months. Now, winds can also be generated because of the water. Now, the land and the water heat up at different rates, and whenever you get that going on, you have a lot of wind. So sometimes the wind is off the lakeshore, and sometimes it comes from the lake onto the land. Now, these winds blow the water, actually, and sometimes the winds blow the water onto one shoreline, and the winds can blow the water so the water level actually becomes 13 feet higher. But the most impressive thing that happens because of lake effect weather has to be the snow. Can you believe that in 2 days in a city in New York City, in New York State, 56 inches of snow fell, and in one place in New York, in one winter, 469 inches of snow fell. That's 39 feet of snow. Now, how does this work? Well, as all the cold air pulls up in Canada during the winter months, it pulls up there, and as it moves across the lake, because you know the lake doesn't freeze, as that cool air moves across the lake, it picks up moisture, it picks up some heat, and as it moves on to the other shoreline on the other side of the lake, it moves up the terrain, and precipitation falls, and normally it falls in the form of snow. And you know, this snow falls at a fast rate. When it starts to fall, sometimes it can fall at 5 to 10 inches per hour, and for a full week, it can snow each and every day in some of these cities. So from Lake Superior down through Lake Michigan, you can see the snow falling here. Around Marquette, they get about 300 inches of snow every year. If you live there, lots of snow to play with. Along Lake Michigan, a lot of Michigan gets affected. Ohio gets affected, Pennsylvania, and as I mentioned before, New York City, or not New York City per se, but the state of New York gets the most snow from lake effect snow. In Buffalo and those kind of cities there. Also, Hooker, New York is a town that got the most. Lots of folks do love the weather, let me tell you. That's why they live up here. They love all that snow. So even here in Duluth, there is a lot of snow. Now, we have a question coming in from what city do we have? Oh, we have a question from Minneapolis, which is just south of us, and it's Allie. Hi, Allie. How are you?
Good.
What is your question?
I was wondering, what is the coldest temperature ever recorded in Duluth?
The coldest temperature ever recorded in Duluth. Well, I'm going to be guessing here, but I imagine it's right around 50 below. Can you believe that? 50 below. The city of Duluth, which is right over here, doesn't get as cold as it does inland. So some of the places inland have gotten as cold as 56 below before. That happened a couple of winters ago. But in Duluth, I imagine it's probably around minus 48 or minus 50, which is cold. In the Twin Cities, it's a little bit warmer than that. So thanks for watching in the Twin Cities. We appreciate it all over the country as well. So there's your segment on weather. It's very interesting. So now that we know what happens with the weather above the surface, we're going to find out what lives at the bottom of this lake.
In your class, discuss the following question. What percent of the world's fresh water is held in Lake Superior? A, 5%, B, 10%, C, 30%, or G, 50%? If you guessed B, 10%, then you were right.
We've now gone deep. We're inside the research vessel, the Blue Heron, and we're with Professor Nigel Watrous, and you're with the Large Lakes Observatory with the University of Minnesota.
That's correct.
Now, Nigel, what exactly do you do?
Okay, I spend my time down here in the boat using sound to study the lake floor and the subsurface geology below it.
Sound, how do you do that?
Basically, what we're doing is we time echoes. We're a little bit like bats, because light doesn't propagate very well in the water, so we use sound instead, which does. So we have a video here that I want to show you that basically shows you some of the instruments that we use to collect data. What we're currently showing right now is the deployment of our seismic source. This is what generates an acoustic shock in the water column. That energy travels down to the bottom of the lake and actually into the subsurface and is reflected back to us. And we record the received signal at the surface using the second half of the instrument, which is known as the hydrophone streamer. We'll see that in a moment. The source is towed off one side of the boat, and the hydrophone streamer goes off the other side. Our acquisition continues around the clock, and we sail continuously from point A to point B. This is a second instrument that we use. It's called a side-scan sonar, and it doesn't tell us anything about the subsurface. Rather, it tells us something about the nature of the lake floor itself. It basically gives us an acoustic photograph of what the lake floor looks like. And you can see that dark area on the side. That's one of the transducers which acts as the source and receiver for that signal.
Okay.
And we'll see some of the data produced by that in a moment.
So you use a lot of different equipment for your work.
That's correct.
What do you learn from it?
We learn a lot of things. For example, we can see here a still of some iceberg scour that is visible on the lake floor.
Wait, you said icebergs?
Icebergs, right. This is off the Apostle Islands, and it's produced by icebergs that were floating around on the lake after the last glaciation, when the lake levels were a bit lower and we had icebergs literally floating around, dragging their keels in the soft sediments. We also see in the eastern part of the lake, some of the deepest parts of the lake, the large troughs that run north-south, and we can see a image of this in a moment. So you see, this is a very detailed picture, and by looking at it, we can say a lot of things about what's happened in the lake and what's happening in the lake today, because everything that happens in the lake tends to leave a signature of some form.
Almost like a footprint.
Exactly, exactly. So it's a matter of interpreting that information to say something about what's going on in the lake right now.
So how do you make these images?
Okay, well, these images that you see here were collected with a multi-beam sonar, which is basically a very sophisticated depth finder. It's a lot like what you'd have on a fishing boat, but rather than having a single beam, we have 101 beams.
Oh, wow.
A lot of beams. And this is what we're looking at here. This is some data that we collected earlier. It's collected over a shipwreck off the Duluth entry here. And what we're seeing here is a rear view of the fan. So you see, we see a broad fan. And on the left-hand side here, we're collecting shape information on the lake floor. Here, we're passing over the shipwreck. It was an old...
Oh, so that's the ship right there.
Exactly. This is basically a side scan image a photograph of what the lake floor would look like using sound. And here we're having shape information. Now, obviously, we don't look at shipwrecks all the time. We're more interested in sort of the physical aspects of the lake. And so here's another example I'd like to show you of something we do study. This is a multi-beam image that was collected off Silver Bay up on the North Shore here of Minnesota. And we're looking at about 50 square kilometers here. This is the lake floor off a taconite processing plant, which was for a long time dumping their waste product into the lake floor. And it's created this apron of material, which you can see here on the lake floor. In fact, you can see it's carved a series of channels.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And we've made a video from this multi-beam data. It's like a flyover, which we actually fly up this channel towards the delta front here, and I'll show you that right now. Okay. The play button. So now we're going to fly up.
Oh, cool.
It's a bit like a cruise missile. We're flying up this channel, which was carved by the sediments which were washing off the face of this delta. And you can see the delta up here. And we're going to fly up to the face of the delta and then up it a little ways.
And again, this is the bottom of Lake Superior.
This is the bottom of the lake. It goes from about 280 meters out in the deepest part to about 20 meters in this particular image. We're now flying back out across the lake floor.
That is pretty cool. Now, what do you learn from all this, Nigel?
Well, we can learn, as I said, what these processes tend to leave a signature in the lake floor, and so by interpreting these images, we can say something about what's going on in the lake. But we can also learn things about what is also happening elsewhere in the world. For example, one of the things you see in side scan images taken in the lake are what we call Lake Superior's rings, and I have an image that we can look at here, a side scan image, which gives you an example of what those rings look like, if they bring it up in a moment. These rings basically are 200 meters. There we go. They're about 200 meters or so across, and they look like someone pressed a donut into the lake floor. Now, if you sail seismic lines or acoustic lines across that, what you'll see is something like we see in the second monitor over here by you. What we see now, we're looking at a slice into the subsurface of the lake, and you can see that the sediments are broken into layers,
right
and
there.
and those layers are broken by fractures. Now, the interesting thing is that those faults, as we call them, look a lot like what we would see in the North Sea oil fields.
Oh, and that kind of helps us.
Well, these faults play a role in determining whether or not oil is trapped in these fields or how difficult it is to produce. But we don't know how quickly those faults develop, and that's very important to understanding these processes. So we think that by studying what's going on in Lake Superior, we can say something about something which has happened or is happening halfway around the world.
All right.
Kind of neat.
That's pretty cool. Well, thanks,
Great.
Nigel.
Okay.
All right, well, we're going to go talk to one of Nigel's co-workers. Her name is Angela Cates. Now, we know a little something about the structure of Lake Superior, and Angela studies the content of what's inside the lake. Let's go see her. She's up on the deck of the Blue Heron. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Dave.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Now, we were, again, down below talking to Nigel about the structure of the lake, but you study what's inside the lake. And earlier we heard Belinda talking about how cold the lake can get. Well, if it gets so cold, how come it never freezes?
Well, the answer to your question, Dave, is volume. Lake Superior is over 3 quadrillion gallons.
That's awful big.
That's awful big. It's a 3 followed by 15 zeros.
Wow. Well, how do you study it then?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that we study the lake. One way that one method, Bell Live team will help us demonstrate right now.
Okay.
What they're trying to do is determine what the Secchi depth is, and this is a test that we use to determine water clarity. So what Steve is doing is he's lowering the disc down until he loses sight of it.
Okay, I think you did that. What did you find, Steve?
It looks like the Secchi depth is about 3 meters.
3 meters?
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. We're here in the harbor in Duluth. Sometimes out in the open water, we see Secchi dips of 9 to 15 meters, something like that.
Is that because of the number of boats here in the harbor, pollution?
I think that plays a role in it, the boat traffic. It's also shallow, and there's 2 major rivers, the Nemadji River and the St. Louis River, that are being input into this lake.
You got a lot of big equipment out here too, Angela.
Yes, this is one we use quite a bit in my research. It's called a CTD.
What does that stand for?
It stands for conductivity, depth, and temperature. Those are 3 of the water column parameters you can measure with this instrument. There's also capability of doing water samples, and the Bell Live team is going to get this ready for deployment, show you how to open these Niskin bottles.
Okay.
In addition to measuring conductivity, temperature, and depth, the CTD can also measure things like dissolved oxygen, pH. Other instruments are added to it. So what they do is they get it ready, and as it's going down at any depth, I can give the command to shut it.
Okay, can we see what it looks like when you take it out in the middle of the lake?
Yeah, we've got a video that will roll here, and this is an actual deployment of the CTD. The way that it works is the CTD is lowered vertically through the water column, and as it's being lowered at about a rate of 1 meter per second, it's collecting data of all the variables that we wish to sample. The data comes back to us on the boat, to the computers on board, as it's being collected. So when it's at 40 meters, we know exactly what the temperature or the conductivity is exactly at that depth.
And you can study wherever in the lake you want, in the depth of the lake.
We go all over the lake. It's nice that when you're at this certain depth, you can tell the Niskin bottle to close and collect a water sample.
And then you can bring it up. And what are some of the things that you found?
Some of the things that we found are, in general, we know there's a counterclockwise circulation of Lake Superior. In addition, looking at long time series, we've seen that Lake Superior has warmed up about 1 degree over the last 90 years.
Okay. We're looking at some of the tape of that. You can see some of the counterclockwise
circulation going around
that you're
the lake.
talking about.
And this is actually a very old map. 1895 is when this was made, and there's some different ways that we study circulation now. At that time, it was done using bottles, deploying bottles and recording where they were found.
All right. Angela, this has been great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. All right, now we know some of the physical properties of the lake. Let's find out what lives inside the lake.
In your class, discuss the following question. How many species of fish live in Lake Superior? The answer will be given in the next segment.
Well, welcome back. You know, we're going to look at what lives in the lake, but we want to let you know that we'd love to hear from you. And our phone number again is 1-218-727-6324. We've got a lot of good questions coming in, so we really do appreciate it. Now we're going to talk about some of the fish that live in the lake, and we have Don Schreiner here, and he's from the Department of Natural Resources, or the DNR, here stationed in Duluth. How you doing, Don?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
It's good to have you here, and you brought some live little specimens with us here today.
Great to be here.
It is wonderful, and we also have Colin and also Heather helping us out from the Bell team. And before we start to talk about this, how many species do live in this big lake?
Well, if you look at the entire watershed, we've got about 75 species in the lake, and about 15 of those are non-native species that have been either introduced or came in on their own. If you look at the main body of the lake, about 5 or 6 species is all we really see there.
Wow, 5 or 6 species in the main part of the lake, and we're talking about 49,000 square miles of water. You'd think that there would be a little bit more than that, but actually, you know, that's only the ones that can handle the depth and the temperature, because the temperature is about 40 degrees during the most of the year, right?
Exactly. Those are the species that are best adapted to the really cold, deep conditions and very unproductive, so we can only have a certain mix of species out there.
All right, we've got a question coming in from Pennsylvania. We have Luke on the line. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning.
Almost good afternoon in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah.
What's your question?
What is the most dangerous animal in Lake Superior?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Dangerous.
What dangerous animal?
Well, I guess, you know, as far as the fish are concerned, probably the sea lamprey is the most dangerous because it does attach to lake trout and other species, and it will kill them if it's on the fish long enough.
So the sea lamprey is almost like a snake with an opening in the front, and it's not supposed to be in the lake, but it's been introduced over, you know, a series of years, right?
Exactly. It's native to the Atlantic Ocean, and it came into the Great Lakes when the Welland Canal was constructed. So it's an invader, and it's done really well at taking care of lake trout in the Great Lakes.
It's killing them. It's killing them. All right. Well, Colin, we have a fish in here that has a lamprey wound in it, which is kind of
Colin's
a sad
going to
thing.
grab that one for us.
What kind of fish is this?
This is a long-nosed sucker. It happened to be one we captured that did have a fresh lamprey wound on it.
A long-nosed sucker.
Long-nosed sucker.
All right, Colin, you got to hold on to that. Oh, and he's strong. Oh, and look at that wound. Oh, my gosh.
Right there on the tail. And that's actually one of the reasons the lamprey is not still there, because on the tail is not a great spot for a lamprey to attach. You can see this is a pretty strong sucker, and he probably flipped the lamprey right off.
Is he strong or what? So he lived because it only went onto the tail, and that's great, but a lot of them do die, right, Don?
Exactly. That scar will, though, heal up, and that fish will be fine as long as Colin gets him back in the tank.
Yeah, let's get him back in the tank. Kind of like a vampire, almost. Oh, there you go. Whoa. Hey, what's this big fish that we have down here, this big guy?
The big guy is the lake trout, and that's the most prevalent species in the lake.
And he's the most prevalent species, but he's also the one the lamprey likes the most.
He would be the top predator. The one behind him here that unfortunately the camera can't see is
he's right back
burbot,
there.
and he is the one that lives on the very bottom of the lake in the deepest part.
Okay, it's all right. You're going to be all right. Let's move over to this tank, and Heather has a really cool species that looks very ancient, looks like a dinosaur almost. Why don't you pull him out? What is it?
Heather's going to capture us here a small lake sturgeon. And this is a species that we're trying to rehabilitate right here in the St. Louis River.
Yeah, Colin, you grab one too, because we got to see two of these. Okay,
at one time, these were extremely abundant. They grow to over 100 pounds. And
really?
About 10 feet long, and can live for 100 years. These guys are only a year old right now.
Look at that guy go. Look, can you believe all the scales?
These are called scutes, actually, and the scales are much different than on the types of fish that we ordinarily catch in the lakes.
Why is his nose pointed like that?
Well, he's a bottom feeder. If you turn him over and look at his mouth, you can see there's his mouth is on the bottom. So, that kind of gives him a streamlined shape when he's down there feeding.
100 years?
100 years old.
I noticed these feelers. What are those for?
The little barbels there are a way that they sense their food. They get olfactory cues from little sensory cells in those barbels.
All right, well, let's let them back down there so that they are okay. Now, the question is are the fish okay, and how do you figure out if the fish are all right? What is the process of that?
Well, we have a pretty intensive monitoring program that we do on Lake Superior, and we usually send out a boat with our crew on it. And at different times of the year, we're doing fish monitoring of different
sampling
different
of the
species.
fish. Okay.
Exactly, sampling fish.
So you head out on the boat and out in the lake, and then what are you basically picking up?
Well, what we do is, I think there's a shot of it here now. We have a crew that goes out on a 26-foot Boston whaler, usually three folks out there, and for lake trout we set gill nets, and the gill nets are about 1,000 feet long. They've got a flag on each end. Right now you can see the guys taking in the gill net. The fish get entangled in that gear. They bring them up, they untangle those fish, and then we collect information from those fish, such as length. We look for fin clips. That tells us whether or not that fish originated in a hatchery or whether it was a wild fish.
Okay, that's good to know.
We look for lamprey wounds so we can monitor how well our lamprey control program is doing.
Here you're taking the scales off?
We also take scales, and scales tell us the age of the fish when we bring those scale samples back to the lab. They also tell us what the rate of growth of that fish is from one year to the next. So there's a lot of information.
A lot of information coming out of there, yeah. We have another call coming in from Minneapolis, and this is Nicole. Nicole, good morning.
Hi.
Hi, what's your question?
Do bigger fish live on the bottom or the top?
Oh, good question. Do bigger fish live on the bottom or the top?
Well, we've got big fish living both on the bottom and the top. It just depends on the species. The two large fish in this tank, the burbot and the lake trout, are both bottom-oriented fish.
These big guys down here, yeah.
And so are the sturgeon when they get large. But we also have Chinook salmon, and they live mostly on the top. They're more in the surface area, and they can get up to 30 pounds.
And I don't know I didn't know this. A lot of folks might not realize that they put salmon in these lakes, and so they've been introducing those, and there's limits on those, and they only live a couple of years, but it's very exciting.
That's right.
Well, Don, thank you. We're going to continue catching. You want to catch that lake trout? Or which one?
This one's a brook trout.
Brook trout. Okay, he's pretty. We'll catch that.
And he spends part of his life in the stream and part of his life in the lake. And he's all colored up right now.
He's so pretty.
Heather's going to try to show him to the folks here, and he's in spawning condition. This is the time of year they come into the streams to spawn.
All right, well, we'll continue catching because we have to reach our limit here with Colin and Heather. Don, thanks so much for joining us.
And thanks, Bell Live team.
They're excited. All right, when we come back, we're going to look at, we looked at a lot of big things that live in the lake. Now we're going to look at some small things, and we're going to get this fish back at the tank. We promise. We'll be right back. Get it in there.
What do you think some of the smallest living creatures in Lake Superior are? Is it A, minnows, B, leeches, C, mayflies, or D, zooplankton? If you answered D, zooplankton, you're right.
I think Melinda and those guys were able to get that fish back in the tank. All right, you saw some of the fish, but now we're going to introduce you to Professor Bob Sterner. He specializes in some of the smallest life forms in Lake Superior, the plankton.
Hi,
how you doing? Now, I take it there must be lots of plankton in Lake Superior.
There is. They're the base of the food chain, and they're the sort of biggest biomass component of the lake. So if you're going to add up what the main living creatures are in the lake, you'd come up with plankton are the most numerous, most sort of abundant organisms out there.
So how do you catch them?
Well, they're really small, and they are fairly sparsely distributed, like many things. We heard about the fish already, how unproductive they are. That's true also of the plankton.
Well, they're so small, you think they would be dense and all over the place.
Yeah, but they're spread out pretty far, actually. So the way we sample zooplankton is with a net like we're seeing on the video here.
You have to catch them in that big net?
That's right. We need a huge net even for these tiny organisms. That's because the zooplankton are so sparsely distributed that we have to sample a huge volume of water in order to get a large sample.
Oh, okay.
So what the net is a nylon material that lets the water pass through and captures the organisms. And the organisms end up in a small sampling cup at the bottom that we'll see in a moment here after the net comes back out of the water.
How long does it take you to collect the sample?
Well, it depends on how deep we're lowering the net to.
Okay.
In the deepest part of Lake Superior, it's over 200 meters, and it takes many minutes to bring this net to the surface. And another thing we have to do when we take a sample is we have to spray the net off because, as we'll see in a moment under the microscope, the plankton have a lot of spines. And those spines tend to get hung up on the net, and we simply use a hose to spray them down into the sampling cup. And now you can see the white cup with the holes in it now. That has a really large volume sample of the plankton of Lake Superior. There'll be a really brownish color. Of course, the water of Lake Superior is very clear, but the brownish color that you just saw was the plankton that we captured in a net. There you go. So what we have now is that very same sample that we took about a month ago. It's been preserved. And in order to give you some sense of scale of how big these zooplankton are.
Or how small they are.
Or how small they are, right, good point. We're starting with an image of a penny under the microscope, and you'll see that in a moment. And what you'll see is, here's our penny that's under our microscope system here. I'm going to pour a sample of that preserved plankton from that cruise that we just saw.
And again, the penny just gives us a reference about how small we're talking.
Yeah, that's right. And so maybe you want to focus on Lincoln's ear as a kind of a landmark to remember the scale here. So we'll move Lincoln out of here now and put our plankton sample under here. And we didn't get a terribly dense sample that time, but now you see some dark shapes, longest shapes right in the middle of the image there. That's the size of the plankton.
Okay.
And I'll zoom up just a little bit now so you have a little better sense of shape.
They almost look like little fish.
They look like little fish. They're streamlined, and though they have the spines, they're moving through water, so they have, in some senses, the same shape as a fish.
Now, you said these are preserved, right?
That's
do we
right.
have any live ones?
We sure do. So now, if our Bell Live team can help us find that square dish again. Oh, here we go.
There you go, Marissa.
Here's our sample. Now, what we've done already is take a live sample from Lake Superior, which is in this big jar. We've poured it into this small square dish.
Okay.
We'll place it under here, and then Marissa, our Bell Live team member, will grab the microscope, and she's going to help us locate some swimming plankton, and you'll see the rapid motions.
Oh, yeah, look at them.
Especially when the dish is moved a little bit, they'll tend to take off. So maybe we could even just try tapping the microscope and see if they'll cooperate. You saw one jump there. Oh, there's a really beautiful.
It looks like they have
grab
long
that focus.
and
they are beautiful.
oh, that's great, Marissa. That looks cool.
So now we see these appendages which are moving very quickly. These are being used to feed, and creating a feeding current also tends to move the animal through the water, giving it a smooth swimming motion. And then when it gets startled, especially when it feels a vibration, it takes off. And with the Bell Live team here, we've been discussing how plankton experience their world, the sensory systems they use, and we've been talking about how they might sense an approaching predator.
Now, what were the long antenna-looking things?
That's exactly what they are. They are antenna. They're used for multiple things. They're used for swimming, and so when it needs to make a rapid motion, it uses those antenna. And they're also really bristling with sensory hairs. And those hairs are used to detect vibrations and also for chemical reception.
Now, why is it important to detect vibration?
Well, if you were a copepod, which is what we're looking at here, living in Lake Superior, what would a big vibration mean to you?
Something's after me.
That's right. The only thing that could create a big vibration out there in the water is an approaching predator, like a fish.
Okay.
And so these have, they're just bristling with sensory appendages to detect these vibrations. And when they feel one, they just shoot off many body lengths in less than 1 second.
So you're a pro with that microscope. That looks great.
So they also have the ability to see. They have eyes.
They do.
They do, though they don't see good images. And an example that I like to use to get this point across is to say it's like taking a paper napkin and unfolding it and holding it up. If you do that, you'll see shapes. You'll see brightness in various spots, but you won't see a good image. If I held it up right now, I would not be able to see you.
Right.
And that's more or less what the visual system of these organisms are.
Oh, I get it. So that's why the antennae are so important to them.
Exactly. Those are antennae, just like an antenna of a radio or something. It's picking up signals from a wide range, and that the animal's processing that information. Another thing that we've seen on the video, and Marissa's looking at right now, is the diatoms, the phytoplankton of Lake Superior.
Those little
the hairy
things?
Yeah, there we go. Now we have it on the video. And there's one that's kind of zigzaggy.
Yeah.
That's also a diatom. That's basically the grass of the lake. And so that is the true base of the food chain. It's the creation of organic matter on which all the rest of the food chain of the lake depends, including the fish and the other things that we're talking about today on Bell Live.
Okay. Clayton from Blaine has a question for us. Go ahead, Clayton.
How deep have you found zooplankton in Lake Superior?
Great question. Thanks for that. You can find zooplankton basically right down to the bottom of the lake. And when we get down into those deep water communities, they're living an entirely different life than the animals are that are up in the warmer and shallower regions. The animals at the bottom of the lake are living off of organic matter that's sedimenting down from upstairs. There's no light down there. The algae aren't growing, but the production of the upper layers generated in the light sinks down. Some of it sinks down, and there's an entire food chain at the base of the lake that's feeding off of that matter that's produced upstairs.
Even though they're real small, they are an important part of the food chain.
They're the middle part of the food chain. So without the zooplankton, we wouldn't have the bigger creatures like fish, and then we wouldn't have anglers catching lake trout either.
All right, thanks, Bob. Well, when we come back, we'll find out what happens if something were to eliminate all the zooplankton out there. Stay tuned. We'll have that when we come back.
With your neighbor, discuss what the abbreviation ppm stands for. Is it A, percent particle maturity, B, previous population magnitude, C, parts per million, or D, please phone mom? If you answered C, parts per million, then you are correct.
Well, we all know that pollution can really be a problem, and it's something that we all need to be concerned with, everyone that lives in every town, in every state. And of course, the lakes are very representative of what's going on around them, and they could get polluted, even this big lake of Lake Superior. So joining us to explain pollution and what we can do to prevent it is Teresa Norberg-King, and she is from the EPA. The EPA stands for the Environmental Protection Agency, and she's stationed right here in Duluth, taking care of Lake Superior. That's a big job, Teresa.
That's right.
It's a big job. Well, out of all the Great Lakes, which one is the cleanest?
Well, Lake Superior is really superior in that regard. It's a great lake. It's very clean, and it's a real supply of drinking water for Duluth, for example.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's such a big lake that if it did become polluted, you were telling me that it would take so many years to become clean again.
Right. Think about everything that you ever dump into Lake Superior might stay there for 200 years or more, because that's how long the water would take to turn over, compared to, say, Lake Erie, which happens in 2 years. It's so shallow.
Lake Erie is so shallow, it just takes 2 years. We have a pollution question already coming in. It's coming in from Denver, which is a beautiful place. And we have Jenna on the line. Good morning, Jenna.
Hi.
Hi, what is your question?
How has the human population affected the lake?
How has the human population affected the lake, Teresa?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because all of our use affects the lake. We have use from industries discharging or wastewater treatment plants directly into the lake. We have non-point source or land use questions from runoff and lake use, agricultural use. So we've actually polluted the lake and we've fixed it in some cases too. We've seen barges burning, rivers burning, and we've fixed that.
There are a lot of big cities that are along the Great Lakes, obviously for commerce, and they're there for a reason. But then again, they were very polluted in the 70s, and then the EPA came around, and things have really turned around.
That's right. It's taken a lot of people, and pollution prevention has become a real big part of our lives.
We all care about that. We have Dana and Adam joining us, Bell Live team members. How you doing? Good. And we're going to be talking about how to figure out where the pollution is and how do you study pollution.
That's right. Well, there are lots of ways you can study pollution. We do it at our laboratory with a lot of techniques in the laboratory. We're going to show that. But you can also go out and do a lot of the things where you've seen it already. They're collecting animals. Then we start to look for contaminants, and we bring samples back into the laboratory.
So speaking of bringing samples back, what we're talking about is actually dredging some of the sediment. And so we have someone out in the boat doing that right now, and they're pulling up some sediment from the bottom, right?
They're taking a grab sample of some sediment, and we're concerned not only about water, and we'll get to show you some water in just a second too, but we're taking a grab sample of sediment because we know that whatever in the water can end up down in the sediment. And every time the water has a storm event or something like that, you can have it resuspended. And as longer it stays in the lake, we have greater concerns because it'll become more concentrated with time.
Yeah, because water clarity is not a specific, if you look at the water and it looks dirty, it might not be polluted. We have an example of that.
That's right, we do. And we have an example of 2 water samples that we've collected. And if you take a look at the one on the right, it's very clear, and the one on the left is amber. What do you guys think is going to be the one that you might suspect to be polluted?
I think that amber one is
looks
really dirty.
It does look dirty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, the interesting part about that is neither one of these are polluted. You can't see pollution in every case, and nor can you tell if it's going to be toxic. So you have to wonder about looking at it from another angle.
And to look at it from another angle, you have to look at the sediment, and we've got some sediments in front of us here, and this is what is on that murky stuff on the bottom of the lake, right?
That's right, where you get down and you go in and you collect, like they showed you on the screen, you get down there and you collect what sinks up between your toes, and you go yuck and get out of there.
Sure.
And what we've seen with these samples is to show you that all sediments and all samples under the water don't look the same, nor do they collect the same kind of contaminants. So something in Lake Superior might collect it where it may not in another environment.
Sure. And a good representative of pollution is how the animals do that live in the sediment, live in the water column. So we have some healthy animals that you guys actually grew. You raised these animals. So what do we have under the microscope?
Well, if you saw on the film a second ago, when they pulled the sediment up, we've got animals that live in that sediment, and we use those for some indicators of what's out there in the environment. We count population numbers. And then we take some of these that we know we can grow well in the laboratory, and we test them. And we
What is that?
This is a midge. It actually has a larval stage that's in the water, and then it becomes airborne. It's very much like a dragonfly or a damselfly, and this is a chironomid. It's also very... The next one would be...
Let's move to the next one.
Is a one that's going to live right on the surface of the water. It's going to live right at the sediment and the water interface. And these are actually a really cool shrimp, but they're not going to be eaten by anything but fish.
Freshwater shrimp. And what's the last one there, the little wormy deal?
Those worms are called an aquatic earthworm, and they are really pretty cool too because they reproduce by budding. And what these can do is show you what will accumulate in certain animals, and we can look for contaminants that bioaccumulate, which is a big deal for human health.
And the last 2 actually live in the water column. We've got these little guys swimming around. What's that?
This one is a daphnid, and it's going to be one that's a parthenogenic, reproduces all by itself with a female population. It lives in here. We're going to run a test with it in a minute.
And we have the minnows, too. These are little baby minnows, man. They're tiny, huh,
They're
guys?
about 2 days old.
2 days old. Wow.
You wouldn't catch much fish with those.
All right, so those are live, healthy specimens. Right. And now we're going to show what would happen if you got some pollution with these sediments. And the pollution we're going to use is just salt.
Just salt. It's what you usually use. In fact, it's your table salt, reminding everything is toxic in certain doses. And so what we've set up here is we have 3 concentrations. We have a 50% salt. It's actually starting as salt water, like an ocean sample.
So Dana's putting in 50% there.
Right. And she's going to do 25% in the next one.
Okay, so less salt, less pollution in this one.
Right, and then up to 12%. So we have a lot less pollution in this one.
And then after a period of time, you would look to see how the animals are doing.
That's correct. And we also want to remind you that we put some without any toxin in it so we can judge how well they respond and that our animals are healthy.
Because you got to have a sample.
Got to have a control.
A control, that's right. Okay, so
now
the 50% is...
We set this test up a few minutes ago so that we could actually be ready for the camera. And what we've got is some 50% salt water, or as if it was ocean water. Freshwater animals don't like salt water, and vice versa. They don't like it to go the other.
Freshwater animals don't want to live in the ocean. They can't handle it. So these guys have not survived.
No.
They're all dead.
They're all dead. We can see that. And now with the 25% solution, meaning less amount of pollution, they're able to handle it. They don't like it, but they're able to handle
And
it,
what do
right?
they look like, Dana?
Oh, they're all surviving, it looks like. They're hopping around or running around the water, just like these two, the control and the one with less salt.
And then with less. So what this tells you is how much can the animals handle?
That's
and
right.
then you're able to go out and tell people how much pollution basically they can
And
put in.
remember that this is only a very simple exposure, and what we'll actually do is other tests will tell you about reproduction and growth and that sort of stuff. And the important part is then we take this kind of information and we set a safe level, we believe to be a safe level that can be discharged into the environment. And that's what EPA does. It regulates that.
And that's what they do, and that's really, really important. So thank you for your question from Denver, and Teresa, thank you for all the information. Dana, also, Adam did very, very well. Well, we now know what the environmental hazards could be and how they could affect the lake, but actually there are some biological things that could live in the lake. We're talking about some exotic species, and I'm telling you, they are ugly. So wait till you see them.
Do you know what the word ballast means? And do you know why it's useful for ships that carry tons of freight? The answer is coming up in the next segment.
We're on board our other research vessel, the L.L. Smith Jr. You know, a lot of people come to the north shore of Lake Superior to enjoy the beauty of this area. But there are some visitors that aren't welcome. Doug Jensen from the Minnesota Sea Grant Program is here to tell us why. Doug, where are you?
Hi, Dave, and welcome everybody to the William A. Irvin. The Irvin is a retired ore boat that's now down on the Duluth waterfront and serves as a museum and a major tourist attraction. We're a few hundred yards from the Great Lakes Aquarium, but you'd have a hard time finding me. We're down in the ballast tank of the Irvin. It's about 15 feet wide and about 50 feet long. And these types of tanks and this type of vessel now serve as a holding tank for ballast water. It's pumped on board. Ships that need weight for trim and stability while they're underway pump ballast water on board. And if they didn't have that, they'd ride up high in the water and it'd be subject to rolling over, especially in heavy waves and in bad weather and that sort of thing. But the bad thing about ballast water is that ships can carry exotic species. And ships go over into foreign ports and they can suck up millions of gallons of water, and often they can contain literally thousands of aquatic plants and exotic species. And once those ships come back to the Great Lakes and discharge that ballast water, once those exotic species are released from the predators and pathogens and diseases and other environmental factors that keep them in check, once that happens, these populations can explode, degrade habitat, drive out native species, and impact our aquatic environment. And that's a really bad thing. But ballast water is not only the only way in which exotic species can come into the Great Lakes. There are several other different ways. Canals and water diversions, release from bait buckets, spread from nurseries and also from backyard gardens, release from aquariums and also by overland transport by boaters. All of these things can bring exotic species into the Great Lakes, into our inland waters. Canals is one of the things that Don Schreiner identified that brought sea lamprey into the Great Lakes. Sea lamprey basically swam up those canals and eventually reached Lake Superior in the late 1930s. Sea lamprey are considered to be sort of the vampire of the Great Lakes. They use a sucking mouth with rasping teeth, and they can gouge a hole in the side of the fish, sucking out the blood and the body fluids. And the sea lamprey has been the most exotic species, most devastating exotic species that's been found in the Great Lakes. For every sea lamprey that's out there, they can consume about 40 pounds of fish during its lifetime, and only 1 in 7 fish will survive a sea lamprey attack. You know, Dave, it's kind of cold and it's kind of dark down here, and talking about vampires and sucking blood and killing fish, how about you and I trade places?
No, I think that's meant for you. I think you should be in that place, Doug. In fact, if you can hang on, we'll come back to you in just a few minutes, Doug. We want to ask you a couple of other questions. Okay. Right now, again, we're on our other research vessel, the L.L. Smith Jr., and joining us now is Professor Mary Balser with the University of Wisconsin Superior.
Right.
We were talking a lot about the lamprey, but you've got some other exotic animals that are causing a lot of problems for us here in Lake Superior.
Well, Dave, it seems every time you turn around, there's a new problem.
as we were collecting the dredge samples a few minutes ago to show what kind of sediment we get, something else came in with us.
What did you get?
And Heather, if you could give me a hand here and show you. This is a sample that was found in our dredge as we brought it up just a few minutes ago, and these are zebra mussels.
And these aren't native to Lake Superior?
Not at all. And they are quite a problem. You can see how they've attached to this piece of rock here, that they're stuck on quite well. Can you try pulling a few of them off of there, Heather, just to see? So you see,
they're pretty tight, huh?
They do hold on quite well. And what the zebra mussels do then is they clog the inside of drinking water pipes. They get all over native clams and kill them. And so they're really quite a problem in the area now.
Have they been a problem here in Lake Superior?
Well, that's what's been interesting is though they've been in the Great Lakes since 1988, it's only recently that we have seen them in our location. And so they originally hired us to monitor to see if the population was going to grow. So we developed some special zebra mussel chambers. And what we would do then is take individual zebra mussels. We would weigh and measure them and give them each their own little apartment house.
Like a little condominium.
Exactly. And then we would put the cover on and place them out in the lake to spend the winter.
Okay.
And normally, when we would bring them up in the spring of the year, 90% of them would be dead, and they would have shell holes worn right through their shell.
Which was a good thing for us.
Well, it was good, and we think it meant then that the very cold water and the low food level was protecting us from zebra mussels. But now let's take a look at some of the samples that we put out this spring. In May, we set out some of our condominiums to see how the animals would survive and whether they would grow.
What do you got
there,
Heather?
And if you bring that right on board, we'll take a look at the newest findings. And it looks like this is our day for zebra mussels.
Oh, yeah.
Not only are the ones in the chambers that we originally put there, but now they have spread and we have young all over the sides of the chambers, all over the rope, everywhere,
so
young
we've got
zebra
a problem
mussels.
now.
We now have a problem in the Duluth Superior Harbor, and we hope they won't start spreading to the rest of the lake.
Any other exotics you're concerned
Well,
about, Mary?
as soon as you get one problem solved, another one comes up. These are our spiny water fleas. They're small zooplankton animals that have a very long spine on the tail end of them that keeps fish from eating them. And so they go around eating the other small water fleas and causing a problem in the food chain. And
because the other fish don't want to eat this.
No one will want to eat that. And what we're worried about now is them spreading to inland lakes.
Oh, you can see some of them now on the monitor.
Yep, they have that very long, nasty spine
Yikes.
that would keep them from being eaten. Now, what we've been finding has been happening is when people go fishing on Lake Superior, the zebra or the spiny water fleas get stuck all over their fishing line. When you reel it in, they get stuck all over the eyes of the rod in the reel. And when someone goes fishing elsewhere, as Brittany's going to go do now, the zebra mussels will...
Great cast there.
She's going to go right with it. The spiny water fleas will fall off into the water.
But aren't they dead?
Well, that's what their first thought is. But we talked about those parthenogenetic eggs. They can overwinter and be frozen or dried up. So when the eggs fall in, out will hatch more water fleas.
So we've just contaminated another lake.
Potentially from our problem. And so we've got things that eat, that clam up and clog up stuff. We've got things that eat the food of the fish. And we even have fish that compete with the other fish. And if you can give us a hand here, oh, we've got some live ones. We went trolling the other day. And normally when we pull in the fish, it's full of minnows that the other fish would like to eat.
Yeah.
Today we've got a new friend. This is the ruff. And look at that spine on the top of them there and along the sides of the gill covers.
That's almost like the spiny water flea. You don't want to eat this.
Not in a different direction, and neither do the native fish.
Now, we have a question coming in from Claire from the Denver Museum.
Okay.
Go ahead, Claire.
Hi.
Hi,
Are there any new exotic creatures in the lake?
Well, this is the thing, is we're finding new ones every day. In fact, yesterday when we were out trawling, we came up with a round goby, another type of fish that lives on the bottom and competes with food for the other organisms.
So they're coming in all the time?
All the time, and that's why we're going to need some rules to try to keep them out of here.
Well, let's go back to Doug Jensen. Again, he's down below in the other ship. And Doug, what can we do? I know you do a lot of outreach. What can we do to stop some of these exotics from contaminating our lakes here in Lake Superior?
Well, Dave, unfortunately, if we're just talking about Lake Superior, we're talking about other inland lakes and rivers. Once an exotic species gets a foothold in that lake, there's no way to eradicate them. So the things that we need to do is to be able to manage the infestation, try to mitigate the impacts, and try to prevent their spread. And the only success story that we have to date is the sea lamprey. Sea lamprey management program has been ongoing for the past 40 years or so, and it's been a very effective program. But it costs us all money to spend to control sea lamprey throughout the Great Lakes. the sea lamprey control program has reduced the sea lamprey population to about 90% of what they once were, and that's then paved the way for stocking of fish and revitalizing the sport and commercial fishing that we have today. But even so, there's still as many lean lake trout taken from Lake Superior each and every year as sport and commercial fishing combined. So the point is that once they're here, you can't get rid of them, and there's very limited tools to try to get rid of them.
Doug from Stewartville has a question for you.
Okay, go ahead,
Derek.
Doug.
I'm sorry, Derek from Stewartville has a question for you, Doug. Go ahead, Derek. Go ahead with your question, Derek.
Hello?
Hello? You have a question for Doug, Derek?
Oh, if you catch a sea lamprey, do you want to throw it back, or would you want to kill it?
You'd want to try to kill the sea lamprey, or you could just let it go. There's several 100,000 sea lamprey in the Great Lakes. I guess you'd feel good about at least removing one of them and saving a few fish.
Good question, Derek.
Very good question.
Okay, so Doug, so what do we do then? Do we just try to maintain a balance with our exotics now? Because it doesn't sound like we can eliminate them.
One of the lessons learned from Lake Superior and from the Great Lakes is that prevention is so important. And as I identified earlier, boating and angling is one of the ways in which exotic species can spread. So each time you're at the water access, before you launch your boat and before leaving any water access, remove any aquatic plants or zebra mussels from your boat, motor, and trailer. Drain lake or river water. Dispose of unwanted live bait on land or in the trash. Rinse your boat off with high pressure hot water if you've moored for more than a day, or let everything dry for at least 5 days. Also, if you have an aquarium, make sure that you don't release the contents of that aquarium into the wild. The bad news is that these exotic species, once they are placed into a natural environment, there is no way to eradicate them, and they're going to be there forever. The good news is that we can prevent the spread if we take appropriate action. And also the good news is that boaters and anglers are taking action at the boat access to prevent the spread. We all need to be good environmental stewards and do the right thing. And armed with this information on how to prevent the spread, that's the way in which we need to go.
Great.
So, Dave, I'll ship it back to you.
All right, great tips for us, Doug. And why don't you come up and get some fresh air?
All right, thanks, Dave.
Well, unfortunately, Belinda, we're out of time. We had a great time out here today. What are we going to be doing next?
Well, we're going to be doing a lot of things next year. We're going to be talking about the forest, but before we go, we've had such a great time. The Great Lakes Aquarium is just a wonderful place for us to do our research, and we've only nicked the surface about these Great Lakes and all the wonderful things that happen in them. So we'd like you to check out our website and do some further research. There's a lot of stuff available on that website, and the address again is belllive.umn.edu, and it'll be continuing to update itself, and we will be updating it throughout the next few weeks. There are new pictures, new graphics, and info. And if you can't get to Duluth, Minnesota, maybe you live somewhere where you might not be able to get here, you can take a quick tour of the museum and also of this great boat. So it has been a superior experience. Next year, we are going to be going to the forest because the forest has a lot of stuff going on with it. There's a lot of animals, there's a lot of birds, there's a lot of insects, there's a lot of plants, and we're going to be exploring all of that coming up at Bell Live 2001. But for the superior experience, did you guys all know that we're going swimming now? Oh yeah, it's only 39 degrees probably,
that's right.
or 40 or something
That's
like
right.
Dave.
I got my suit. I'm ready.
We've had beautiful weather, we've had a great time, and hopefully you have as well. So thank you for joining us. See you later. It's been great.